Hey Nimrod, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Amelia. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm not a morning person, so I'll be like sipping on my coffee still.
That's all right.
Yeah, so a couple of questions I wanted to ask you. So topic of your talk, team-led growth and the rise of multiplayer collaborative SaaS. So I kind of see where you're coming from with this. Could you like give us a little bit more background on, what Code does? Maybe, if you could tell us a little bit of the story, because, first you were acquired by Facebook, right? Then you kind of built your whole career there, and then you decided to leave and start your own startup, which, so far has been massively successful. So before we kind of get into the topic, like give us a little bit more background so, the viewers also know that about you.
Sure, yeah. So I've worked at a startup that was acquired by Facebook, which built an internal tool within Facebook's internal tool ecosystem. It was a tool for data science and research. A few, thousand employees at Facebook would use it regularly, and I basically worked within this very rich internal tool ecosystem. At Facebook, we built everything. There's like an internal version of Tableau, an internal version of HR tools, recruiting system. And all of these tools are built on the same frameworks by Facebook's engineers. And so there's some connective tissue between all of the tools that makes you very, very productive. For example, you get this one notification widget that shows you notifications from across everything. So you could get like one notification because there was like a dip in some marketing dashboard, and the next one would be about approving PTO for an employee, right? And so then when
Very
I
smart.
left Facebook after 5.5 years of being a PM there, and worked with other startups, startups like Sneak and Riskified, and I saw how the average SME works with, Okta says on average 92 different SaaS tools, and I saw how sort of siloed all of these tools are. They're all destinations where you work alone, even though you need your team for feedback, approval, help, passing on the baton to do the next bit of the job. And so that's where people sort of default to Slack, and they constantly copy links and screenshots and interrupt all the rest of their team in Slack when they need something small within a specific tool. And you don't see that in tools that have collaboration built in, like Google Docs or Figma, or some of the newest sort of most talked about, most successful tools. And that's when it clicked for me that we build SaaS like single player games. We build them for one person, even though a team in a business uses them. And so this is what brought me to start Cord, to really sort of help other SaaS tools become multiplayer and get the best in class collaboration features, and sort of benefit from this team-led growth, this sort of layer where people bring in their teams to work with them, to collaborate with them in the tool, and sort of gain, seat expansion and retention and all the good stuff that comes from serving your users better. So yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah, wow, this really, resonates so much with me because we have a pretty big marketing team at that point. So like 4 or 5 people full-time plus, like 10, 12 freelancers. So in order to collaborate with them, basically I'm constantly either making screenshots and pasting them in Asana with these arrows all over the place. And then I'm praying that people discover it in Asana. So I'm like, bugging them on Slack, hey, I left you a comment in Asana, right? Because our Asana by this point is just humongous. So, it really rings a bell. And basically from the tools that you mentioned, we use a lot of them. We use Figma, we use like Unbounce, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then there are, there is Storychief with comments, there is Figma with comments, there is Asana with comments. And like, you get all these email notifications, and honestly, I'm pretty sure 20% of my notifications fall through the cracks, at least for mine, because, you know, I just can't keep up with all of them. So yeah, that's a brilliant idea. So could you tell us a little bit more about how actually Cord, you know, works as this connective tissue, right?
Yeah. So look, first of all, I empathize with the marketer case very, very strongly. I actually work very closely with marketers at Facebook, and marketers are in a sort of unique position. They're by far the sort of role that uses the most tools in their stack. So, you know, you can look at the MarTech ecosystem, and there's market maps in sequential years. And it started with like 100 or so tools around 2011. And in 2019, there was a market map. There's 7,040 different MarTech tools. And so obviously nobody uses them all, but even just using like the Facebook ad campaign manager, and the LinkedIn ads manager, and the Twitter ads manager, and the Snapchat, that's already 4 tools, not to mention your, you know, tools for CRMs, for managing email campaigns, for, you know, managing all of the creative, and so on and so forth. So definitely lots to do there. What we do is a couple of things. On the one hand, you can download the Cord Chrome extension for free, use it with your team, and what you get is collaboration across all of these tools, and it connects to your Slack or Microsoft Teams, it connects to Asana or Jira or any of these tools. And there you can get a unified inbox and essentially communicate in context, always with a screenshot of the tool you work in, annotating the actual, you know, copy or campaign stats or anything that you work on, and leaving this conversation in place for the next person who has to go and see, well, you know, did someone talk about this before? Was this problem mentioned? What was the feedback there? So that's one way in which it works for teams. But the other way is we work with the SaaS vendors themselves. So, you know, we're far off from getting Google to integrate it into Google's AdWords, but SaaS vendors like Typeform and others are integrating Cord so that all of their users get this system of collaboration. And what we hope to see is that as more and more tools in your stack adopt Cord, you basically get the benefit of both, you know, the best-in-class collaboration from a team whose core mission is to make you work better, as opposed to, you know, the SaaS tools themselves that have these like 2 competing missions. On the one hand, working on communication, making sure that, you know, the notification works and are consistent, that it delivers it on Slack and connects to all the tools that you need, and has capabilities to record your screen or have, you know, co-browsing real-time sort of cursors on the screen. All of that is like very, very complex technology, and building that while you also build your actual core, you know, CMS, CRM, marketing tech tool, BI tool, that's just, you know, spreading effort, and they end up with sometimes sort of subpar collaboration compared to what they can just buy off of Cord, and so benefit their users and end up being much more sort of cost effective for them as well. So if a tool needs collaboration in it, I would say, you know, try and look at Cord or our other competitors, and then you just don't have to build it yourself and figure it out and figure out the design. It's a complex product problem that you don't need to solve. And your users will benefit from having like best-in-class collaboration that is uniform across all their tools. They know how to use it, they know what it can do, they connect once, and so on.
That totally makes sense. I mean, you sold me, but tell us a little bit more about the concept of team-led growth, right? So I see the connection between what you're doing and your mission at Cord to actually facilitate team collaboration. But what is actually team-led growth? Like, we talk about product-led growth all the time, right? And in our domain, we also see the problem that you see, that collaboration is lagging behind. For instance, if you take invited users, right? So part of your team that gets invited to a specific tool, usually there is no onboarding for them, right? And it often happens that the new user onboarding has finished like weeks or even years before the new team member joins the company. and then they are replacing someone who was well versed in the tool and have like absolutely nothing at all to start learning the new tool. Sometimes if it's a marketing department, it's a tool stack of like 20-30 tools they need to suddenly learn. So I kind of get an idea how lack of collaboration can slow your team's progress and can slow down your growth. Is that what you mean by team-led growth? Or like maybe you could explain the concept from your perspective a bit more.
Yeah, and I think you're highlighting a very interesting specific sort of gap that team-led growth helps solve, but I think it goes a bit deeper. So to understand team-led growth, I start like you. I contrast it with product-led growth. Product-led growth is an amazing playbook, and team-led growth builds over it. It doesn't replace it. But product-led growth was an awesome development over selling software just using salespeople in the top-down motion, which is still very important, but it used to be virtually the only way of selling software. And while product-led growth sort of highlights how important it is for the product to be easy to be trialed and self-serve onto a paid tier and like have the product really walk the user through, all the capabilities and how to onboard other team members, it's missing an entirely different emergent technique that led to the best and fastest growing SaaS we see today, like Figma, Notion, Airtable. Frame.io, was just acquired yesterday for $1.3 billion by Adobe. And it's all that Frame.io is like a video editing tool like Adobe After Effects with collaboration. And Adobe saw what Figma did to Adobe XD and decided they're not going to miss the boat on video editing, collaborative video editing, and just bought the Frame team. And there's other tools which they're really about being used together in a collaborative way as a team and making it valuable and easy to invite other people to work with you in the product as a way of growing the user engagement. That's what team-led growth is. So when you can really work and communicate multiplayer in your product and it's integrated in your organization's workflow systems, that's what I'd say is the true collaboration, which enables team-led growth. And it means that you can onboard other team members by leaving them, instructions and messages in the product. So when you're away on PTO or you left the company or whatever, the company's knowledge base stays in a place that people actually find it. They don't have to like scroll 6 months back in some marketing channel, or look at like disconnected documents with stale screenshots. They can find, how your team works, what your team wants to highlight, the discussions, that happened inside the product itself. So it's a layer over just the product talking to the user, where we enable the actual team to talk to the user.
Right. So the team to talk to the user. That's also interesting. Like, tell me, how do you employ team-led growth in Cord? Actually, do you also do that? Do you use your own tool to?
Yeah. So look, let's talk about this concept of collaboration, why it's important for SaaS, and I think that's gonna really answer that. But we work in businesses together, right? So, but our tools are built single player. That's the fundamental problem. So almost everything that you do in business, whether you're in tech or not, has an element where you have to communicate to other people. Again, you need to get help, approval, feedback, hand off the baton to the next person. And this is why our Slack and inboxes are the tools that we use the most. That's why they're overflowing, because communication is such like an inseparable part of getting work done. And so, communications can be thought as like a bigger sort of job to be done, a bigger sort of workflow where your SaaS tool slots in one specific, you're a CMS or a marketing tech tool or an AI copywriter, whatever you are, you slot in a bigger workflow where communication is a big part of it. And so people will work in your tool for a bit, but then communicate about that work elsewhere. And what you see in the best tools where collaboration is implemented as a first-class citizen and works really smoothly, it lets you work together with your team. And people prefer that. People prefer to work inside Figma or inside Google Docs, and then it's there, it's in context, you can find it easily, you can see what it refers to. And so the collaboration just extends the value of your product. It exposes it to many more people who might not be the actual creators or the primary users of your product, but are just as important in the workflow. And that's what Figma does. And they have these really nice charts that show how many creators, but how many other commentators and feedback givers and people who are not editors are going into Figma, using Figma in the orgs that they use, and at a scale that's like surpasses just the creators. And what it means is that your product actually gets used, and people can see how your product gets used. And for SaaS vendors, that just ends up being higher retention and more seat expansion. It's just harder to rip out a tool that has your org's communication and knowledge in it, rather than just a bunch of files about old projects that you can start anew with a new tool. So it's a great point of differentiation for your clients. It ends up giving value. And so for our product itself, it's a communication product. The network effects are built in. All that it does is enable collaboration everywhere else. But I think for all the other products out there that haven't thought or haven't prioritized collaboration because they're following their core mission, I don't know, again, fraud analytics, security, incident response management, whatever, slotting in the collaboration part usually means you get, and then getting the best in class collaboration usually means that you can just like fast track that growth and that retention, that seat expansion inside existing sort of companies that you sold to.
Yeah, you mentioned account expansion. That's another point that definitely kind of comes from team-led growth, right? But also I think like you really hit the perfect timing, because with remote work becoming so ubiquitous and many companies deciding to stay remote even after the pandemic, right? Basically become more competitive. I listened to this interview with the founder and CEO of Hopin, right, which is like the fastest growing European startup. They, launched at the perfect moment, February 2020, right, online events, absolutely exploded. Like I think the valuation is over 1 billion right now. They hit like million ARR in the first month, and he said that there is no way they're going back to in office working, because that would make them uncompetitive compared to like all the other startups that can hire remotely and hire for the best talent. But the problem I see with remote work is that, as you said, the collaboration, sometimes it's just so frustrating that I can't, effectively point something out to someone on the screen, and I need to take all these screenshots and then like basically store them somewhere. So I have these moments, especially with design work, right, where you have to coordinate a couple of people working on the same design project. Like if it's a big project like the website, right, one is writing copy, another doing the designs, another doing the animations, and then you suddenly find yourself with so many stakeholders being completely disconnected and trying to communicate on Slack, or maybe at best having a meeting, right? But then if our growth managers in Canada and our graphic designers in Romania, right, it becomes so difficult. So did you think about that? Did you think about like how Cord is going to facilitate remote work as well when you started?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I don't want to come across like I'm not some kind of prescient, sort of a genius forecaster. There's a lot of people who held this opinion before the pandemic, and I was just one of that movement that was a bit smaller, but really strongly believed that, I looked at it before the pandemic from the perspective of just the hyper centralization within a few key cities, and I thought that was untenable. So I didn't see the pandemic coming, but I thought, look, it's just unreasonable that the salaries and the costs of hiring talent in all the big cities, San Francisco, New York, London, Tel Aviv, was shooting through the roof. All of that money was being funneled essentially to real estate, because the rents were going through the roof because everything is hyper-centralized. And there's like amazing talent, out here in the UK, in Manchester and Brighton, and like other regions of the UK, and of course in the US and so on. And it just sounded unreasonable to me that like people won't just start because it's much more available today to work remotely. When I was at Facebook, I was managed out of San Francisco. I was managing a team in Tel Aviv. I was on Zoom calls. Well, we use Blue Jeans, but like all the time. And so I think I had like a strong belief. Back in 2019, when I pitched this idea, I brought out stats that showed that remote work was, constantly increasing at a high rate. And of course, the pandemic was like a shock to this, and brought everyone to realize that it's possible. And that's it's a terrible disaster for humankind that I wish wouldn't have happened. And, I've been affected by it and friends of mine, but had this side effect that was good for businesses like Hopin and honestly like ours, in terms of the interest, the client, engagement in this, the money we could raise for it, and so on.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's exactly it. So kind of you're spearheading the new revolution in remote work with Cord. Yeah, that was super interesting. Thank you so much, Nimrod. And really looking forward to your talk on Product Drive, which we are going to air on the 4th and 5th of October. And then we're also going to have a networking party afterwards, online, remotely. So yeah, if anyone wants to ask Nimrod a question, you will have an opportunity. And yeah, I hope to see you there.
Thank you, Amelia. I'm also, fascinated by this topic. We deeply researched it. I'm looking forward to share the sort of step-by-step process and the biggest levers that your product can use to build network effects into your B2B SaaS,
that
product.
Would be super interesting for PMs, right? I can already imagine the stickiness, right? That would produce. Awesome. Great. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.